Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to do some speed cut testing. That sounds like a fun game to play. What I have here, in case you don't recognize it, this is one of the new Spyderco Edgeratis. This is not the real deal. This is a replica that I got from OK Knives. I will put a link to the actual review video I did on this knife up there in the corner if you want to see all the details and me diving into really what is a tremendously cool knife. I can give you the short version here. This is essentially the exact Shaman handle. It matches up everything perfectly with the Shaman, and then a rather unique blade. It's a little bit like a PM2, however, it has no hump. That's one of the killer features to me, is that there's no hump. I'm a guy who likes to have his thumb a little farther out over that hole, and having that hump on the PM2 is kind of a deal breaker, especially when I'm choked up. So, but you'll notice it does have a blade shape more similar to the PM2 than it does to, say, the Shaman. I'll throw this up here just for good measure. That is essentially a Shaman. PM2 versus Para 3, you can see this is clearly the same size as a Shaman, the same size as a PM2, so this is definitely more in the full size knife size. I say that 10 times fast. Let's do a quick rundown of the specs. I'll pull them up on the left-hand screen. 8¼ inches total length, 3½ inches total blade, but about 3.1 on the cutting edge. Closed length's about 4.7 inches. I'm a size large glove, if that helps you. I'm choked back here, choked up here. This knife is made for big hands, no problem. Blade thickness on mine's 150 thousandths. The handle thickness just a hair under ½ an inch. Again, it is all of a Shaman's handle, satin finish, flat grind, aluminum. That's worth pointing out. These are not titanium. These are aluminum scales, as are the real ones that Spyderco makes. OK Knives says this is a 9CR18 blade. There is no reason to doubt that because you don't particularly need to brag about that, right? The real one comes in an S30V, 3.3 ounces, makes this a super lightweight carry knife for the size of what you're getting in the blade. Man, this is a great smaller, this is a big knife that feels and carries like a small knife. I paid just under 30 bucks, $29 for it. Behind the edge is a very thin 16 thousandths of an inch. I will say that I have also reprofiled this blade. So I've knocked this down on the WorkSharp Pro to an 18° behind the edge. You can see it's a near mirror finish. I took it all the way up to an 800 grit. That's what I tend to do. And then of course, ceramic and stropping. So I'm expecting big things out of this knife. It is, because it was resharpened, it's obviously a 10 out of 10 on the old redneck sharpening scale, or redneck sharpness scale. So that's all I need to say about this. Let's just dive in, get over to some cutting, and see how this thing holds up. All right, so starting with the cardboard, as always, about 385 square inches of cardboard. Remember, I did sharpen this knife before this test. This first piece of cardboard is at regular speed, so this is how fast or not fast, I guess, depending on your perspective, that it will slice through cardboard. Does a great job. I guess the easiest comparison that most people will readily recognize, this is essentially a PM2 blade. It starts out thick, about 150 thousandths at the heel of the blade, and then it narrows down to a very fine tip taper at the front of the blade. So it depends on what part of the blade you're using as you're cutting through these materials. If you're using the back of the blade where it's thicker, you'll feel that a little bit more, although there's no resistance really, and at 18 degrees it slices through cardboard with no problem at all. But if you're using out towards the tip of the blade, then it's hot knife through butter kind of cutting. And you can see here, it tears up this cardboard with no problem. The only question really is going to be, how will the edge hold up after all of this? So let's grab our piece of paper and see what we can figure out. I got to get all the gunk off. So let's see. First pass, nice and clean. Piece of cake. Second pass, also clean. That was me coming out of the cut at the edge. You can see cutting through this, no problem. Maybe something now a little bit towards the tip, but you can see even on slow cuts, it's cutting through that no problem. So there's really no snags to speak of. You're going to watch me change my mind here. Can't quite give it a 10, but I will give it a 9. Let's move on to the next. So now I'm trying to add more of this test just to show you the angle of the tip. Again, it's basically a PM2. You're going to have to raise up a little higher if you want to get it, but draw cuts, no problem really with this blade. The hose, I'm looking, how easily does the knife just kind of push through the material? You can see towards the heel of the blade, again, where it gets a little thicker, you feel a little bit of thickness, but you can see for yourself, there was minimal to no resistance. If you had to cut rubber hoses with this knife, no problem at all. It's just now a question of the 𝗦𝗵�cie𝘄𝗀 steel. How does it hold up after this test? So let's grab a quick piece of paper and see. Again, that's pretty good, clean cuts right there. It's better than a lot of knives that I have tested, including a lot of supposedly superior steels. Now I see, okay, I do have a little snag. Maybe, let me see if I can really find that again. Can I cut quickly past it? And now this is just me being stupid and wasting everybody's time here. So there's a little bit of a snag out there, but I can cut past it. So I'm going to knock it down to an 8 and keep on moving. The sisal rope is typically an edge killer. And again, I'm looking for this knife to pop through this rope. I don't want to have to saw it with this knife blade. And you can see the second cut was better. This third cut now, not so good. Fourth cut, a little better. Fifth cut, now it's starting to get more dull. So I can literally feel this thing getting dull. You can see I'm starting to have to saw through this rope. That's not what you want. And it's interesting because there's not really any major snags, but I guess just overall, it doesn't have bite. That's what it is. It depends on how this knife was sharpened. I did do 12 rope cuts here just because I wanted to really test it out. I'm not feeling any snags in this blade. Let's see what the paper tells us. So I still had that little bit of a snag out at the tip. There's a little bit more. So it'll cut fast through it. So that tells me usually that's a 7. If I got minor snags that I can cut through when I cut kind of fast, I knock this back down from an 8 to a 7.5 when you get to the final results. Let's see about the wood. The wood is more about ergonomics than anything else. This is basically a shaman handle, so I'm expecting and really feeling good ergonomics. I like this choked forward saber grip. This is the reason I like this blade style without the hump, because I can get my thumb out over it. So now I'm switching into a hammer grip, try to get a little more power into that cut, and see, usually the top edge of the knife bothers my hand, kind of the web of my hand here, but great bite into the wood. This is a really hard wood stick. I do feel that a little bit up there on the edge in that hammer grip. But the pocket clip, this aftermarket pocket clip, was a really good choice. I don't feel that at all. But the saber grip is really where it's at for this knife. I can control it with my thumb. Feels good. Let's see if we did any more edge damage here. And still, that's basically kind of where we've been. I got that little snag out towards the tip, the belly of the blade right there. Now it's definitely starting to hold the cuts up a little bit more. I'm having a hard time cutting fast through the material. So I'm just going to keep cutting paper till I satisfy myself that I have come to the right score. So you can see, still does a fine job cutting paper. Most people would consider this knife still to be sharp, but you know, when you've had really sharp knives, you know the difference. So now it's a 7. Let's drop this bad boy back up and see if we can get it back. 𝗦𝗵�cie𝘄𝗀 steel should strop easily. The brown side of my strop here is a 16 micron. Diamond emulsion, and the green side is a 6 micron diamond emulsion. These have been great. I appreciate somebody gave me the tip of trying these out. These diamond emulsions have worked fantastic for me. Really happy about that. And let's see, yeah, now we're back to 10 out of 10, slicing clean through everything. So that helps reinforce that I did have the right scores previously. Now we're back to a 10 after stropping, which is what you're looking for in a knife, especially a 9CR. So pretty good overall results. Let's pull up the test scores and dive into what we found. All right, so our knife today is on the far right side of the page in blue. This is the Spyderco Edgerati replica from OK Knives. I've got the last 11 tests leading up to it. This knife was in a 9CR18. I believe that's true because who would brag about that otherwise? They did not give us any HRC rating, so I was kind of under the impression usually that means it's not well heat treated, but it actually did pretty well. If this was a great, perfectly done 9CR18, Knife Seal nerds say this should be a 4.5 on the edge retention scores out of 10. I did sharpen this knife to 18 degrees. That has always helped knives perform better in these tests. It did start out as a 10 out of 10. I cut 385 square inches of cardboard, knocked it down to a 9. Then we did our 3 hose cuts, knocked it down to about an 8. I did 12 rope cuts, which is a little more than usual. That knocked it back to about a 7.5, somewhere between a 7 and an 8. Then after the wood cuts, I gave it a pretty solid 7 there. Used about 20 strokes per side on the strop to get it back to a 10 out of 10. So let's talk about my kind of overall impressions and takeaway. Did excellent job in the cardboard. I mean, this, as I mentioned, is essentially a Spyderco PM2 blade, right? It did just okay on the hose. Maybe I'm being a little hard on it. It actually did pretty good on the hose. It didn't make really clean cuts through the hose. And it did create just a few little minor, maybe snags or nicks in the blade. The rope cutting was a little more rough than I expected, especially given the fact that the sharpness was still pretty high on this thing. It kind of barely was making it through that rope at the end. You can see I was having to saw it a little bit. So I made a note here that this is probably not a really hard steel, but even that's maybe not so fair. This is a 9CR18 steel, right? So maybe it didn't have the best heat treat in the world. I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation. It did feel a little bit soft as I was doing the resharpening, the reprofiling of the blade. So I kind of knew that it wasn't really a high HRC, but again, it's a 9CR18, y'all, and it was like, what, a $30 knife? So holy cow, maybe I'm being a little hard on it here. Excellent ergonomics. This is essentially, like I said, a shaman's handle in shape and size and dimensions. Maybe not quite as rounded around in the corners. You know, in a hammer grip, I would feel the top edge of that handle, right? But that's pretty typical in a hammer grip. When I do the saber grip with my thumb stuck out over the blade, it felt great. There were no hot spots at all. I'm really glad I put that aftermarket clip on it. I'm pretty sure if I'd have left the original factory clip on it, those always give me hot spots when I'm cutting. You know, those big spoon clips that dip down, they're just oversized. So definitely the aftermarket clip was the way to go, especially for the $7 I paid for it. I think it looks pretty cool, and it definitely improved the ergonomics of it. This is about what you'd expect for actually a fairly decent 9CR. I mean, who in the world buys a $30 knife in 9CR18 and expects the edge to hold up after all these kind of cut tests better than a 7 out of 10 at the end of those tests, right? So I guess I'm being a little hard on it. You have to keep it all in perspective. So part of what I'm doing is trying to compare it to other knives in maybe different, better steels that held an edge better. And really what you have to think of is, okay, this is a 9CR18 $30 knife that looks cool as hell, in my opinion, feels great. It's super lightweight because of those aluminum skeleton scales. Pretty good results overall, just to have gone down to a 7. I mean, I've got my Magna Cut rat model was at a 7, and that's a high HRC Magna Cut that was resharpened, and it was a 7 at the end of that test, right? The OK229 Shaman in M390 steel was a 5 at the end of the test. So that being the case, you know, I'm a little hard on it. I said, okay, edge retention's about a 6, and maybe that's in comparison to some of the other knives that I had tested. Which is really not fair, because if you look back at the Rat Model 1.5, you can see it was a 7 also, and I gave it an 8 in terms of edge retention. So, but there was some issues there. There was just one nick in the belly of that, and the rest of the knife blade was really perfectly fine. It's still very sharp. It was just that one little gouge in the blade for the Rat Model. So that's why it kind of got a higher score. Let's stick with the Edgerati. I give these 2 scores in terms of edge retention. Is probably you should give this maybe a 7. And if you're really comparing it just to other $30 9CR18 knives, this is probably an 8 or a 9 in terms of edge retention. But compared to all the other tests I've done, 6 or 7. In terms of EDC, I'm giving this a 9. I can't give it a 10 because it did drop to a 7 after cuts. So a 10 would be like, this thing is still at least a 9 or a 10 after all these tests, and it's great for EDC. So again, fantastic EDC knife. This is a large full-size knife that has a well-known blade shape, basically a PM2 blade shape, although it doesn't have the hump, which I really love even more. I've decided that I don't like that big hump because I like sticking my thumb a little further out on the blade. So this no hump blade, again, for me is perfect. and you've got the shaman handle. So you've got a nice full-size knife. It's super lightweight, easy to carry. It's 30 bucks. Even in the 9CR18, it only dropped to a 7, which is better than a heck of a lot of other knives that I've tested in these tests. So for all those reasons, I'm giving this thing a 9 on the EDC scale. Thanks so much for sticking with me. If you're not already subscribed, it would mean the world to me if you join our little band of renegades. It really helps the channel out too. Throw your boy a thumbs up if you would, please. That's a small, easy thing you can do. I know I always forget to do that on videos myself. Do that if you would, please. Otherwise, y'all hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you like this kind of faster going through the tests. I'm trying to speed this up a little bit so these videos aren't quite so long. Let me know if you have any feedback about that. Any of you guys get this Edgerati knife? What has been your experience with this knife? I'd really love to hear. I know a few of you guys were talking about getting one. Love to hear what you guys think about it as well. Otherwise, I appreciate y'all as always, and I will see you on the next video. Take care.